Yeah, one of the public access ones work, and one of the other. Give me 1 second.
I apologize to everybody, we're having technical difficulties, which is why the clerk is running around trying to get everybody online, so stay here.
That's the way to go. Yeah. Two public access ones, you get on I know this. There you go. You want a few minutes to decompress, because they're ready to go. It's up to you if you're ready to go.
Decompress would be great.
Well, I figured.
2 seconds.
So we'll.
Thank you.
I think they should give him an official sponsorship. Sponsorship of the TLT and
We'll call this meeting to order. It is 6:34. Any declarations of special interest or general nature thereof? Please declare so.
none, we'll move forward with delegations and presentations. We'll give Mr. Taylor a few minutes to breathe on the way in, and we're going to ask Sonya Jodoin to come forward, the Executive Director of Victim Services for Leeds and Grenville, for this presentation. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for letting me come and join you. I should be able to get through this in 10 minutes once it gets, the slide gets up. And I'm certainly open to questions at any point along the way or once we are complete. And, not there yet.
It's loading.
That's okay. So I can start talking what it'll most likely give you some basic information. So Victim Services of Leeds and Grenville is a non-profit organization. Just so that we, just at the very start, just so that we're really super clear, I'm not here to ask for money. We had, there's been a lot of turnover this year in terms of municipal leadership throughout Leeds and Grenville. And so we have been out and about doing a bit of a presentation to various different councils because we work in your communities. And we felt like it was a good idea for everybody to have an opportunity to know who we are, because if something happens or something's happening, you will see us floating around, and typically they'll look like somebody like Patty who's with me now. So. So we are funded by the Ministry of the Attorney General's Office via the Victim Justice Fund, and there are about 49 victim service sites, about 49 throughout the province. We have a set of standards that we adhere to, but we have flexibility as to how we deliver those standards. So we all have the same core mandate, so crisis assistance and practical assistance, accompaniment, information referral, public education, and community liaison. And so crisis assistance is our emergency service department, so to speak. So we respond to pager 2, police, fire, paramedics. They have our pager number, can page 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we accompany them alongside whatever emergency that might be. So that could be on the side of the road, it could be at someone's house. We're a mobile unit. We're covering a large rural catchment area. It's not realistic for us to have a center somewhere that's located in a town that nobody can get to. We don't have public transportation really, so we travel out to where people are. And practical assistance is really geared towards the first 24 hours to 48 hours to try to access other longer term services. We are a referral service, so we have a couple of programs that I'm going to talk about that where we carry clients, but the majority, the bulk of our work, our goal is to kind of work as that safety net between emergency services and community services. And so now they just refer to as system navigation. So essentially our mandate is to get connected with folks who've been involved in some kind of traumatic experience of some level and help them get connected to whatever resources they wish to within their community. And so it's our job to make sure we know how to do, what everybody does. And we actually have quite a number of MOUs, so memorandums of understanding and service agreements with quite a large number of organizations in town. And that's that slide. So a crime, one thing that is really important to know, crime does not have to be committed to access our services. Our office locations right now are in 2 different OPP detachments. So my office is in the Leeds County OPP detachment on Highway 29, and we have another office with some staff in the Prescott detachment, and we have an office at Thousand Islands Secondary School that we actually have a staff that works in there full time. For a youth program that we also run. But that's because our budget doesn't allow us the opportunity to have tons of office space, and this allows us to be spread out. But crime does not necessarily have to be committed. Anybody can refer themselves at any time, or somebody can refer on their behalf. The bulk of our referrals come from our police services, though, and our emergency service partners. So who we help, so we have a broad mandate, and we are mandated to assist in any sudden death situation, so that can be expected or not expected, any homicide situation, including attempted homicide, Any suicide-based situations, so if somebody's actively suicidal, it's your mental health crisis team, that's not us. If somebody has completed suicide, then that becomes a situation that we respond to and that we deal with. Any kind of tragic circumstance, disaster or fire. Motor vehicle accidents, so as you can imagine, the 401 here, we respond to, the big bus accidents and all of those things that happen along here. Break and enter, home invasions, and robbery. Any physical assault, sexual assault, or domestic assault. Elder abuse, child abuse, stalking and harassment, hate crimes, and human trafficking, and yes, human trafficking is happening here. And we respond to any age, so basically from birth to death, male and female. So it's really, really, really hard to not qualify for services for our organization. So we're very much one of the few organizations that don't have a whole lot of criteria that kind of knocks you out of the running to be able to access services. That also means that it's very difficult for us to say no to anything, and the volume is quite large, it's quite excessive for small communities. So there's a couple of programs that we also offer. So outside of, we have our emergency services kind of mandate that we respond to. We also have some programs that we deliver on behalf of this one, the Administrative Attorney General's Office. So we have staff that specifically work within these programs. And this one's a family court support program because the Domestic Violence Death Review Committee that our network is a part of has found that the vast majority of domestic homicides happen in relation to family court, not criminal court. So the ministry put together a program to try to help to create a better process and more safety for individuals that are involved with family court. So available to male and female. So really, we love this program. It's really super popular, and we have a staff member that works within this. We will help assist people to access the Internet Child Exploitation Program. So that is run out of a place in Toronto, and that's for the province. So that's run out of Toronto. So the application process can be difficult, and so we participate with the group in Toronto to make sure they have appropriate counselors on their list. But anybody from 18 and under can access specialized counseling if they've been involved with any online luring, somebody's sharing their pictures, they've been recruited online, there's any sexting or type of arrangement or something like that. And they have been a fantastic program, and they also will work with different families, like family members as well, that are also potentially looking for counseling. We have a mobile tracking system program. So they're just little the size of pagers. They're just little GPS-enabled devices that high-risk individuals can keep with them and wear on them. Now these are, because they're GPS enabled, that means they have a panic button. So if they press the panic button, it automatically sends an SOS signal that gets their latitude and longitude and coordinates to the police service that they're associated with. So this is something that is a really intensive and intrusive program, because you can essentially just look up and see where anybody that's carrying one of those is at any given time. And so it's only for the most highest risk situations. So something like the ladies in Wilno that were murdered by their partner, 2 of them were carrying MTS trackers when that happened. So this is a program that is not supported by the ministry. We have 10, and it's relies solely on fundraising for this. So if we ever come back for money, it's going to be for help us keep this program going. We have our mandated to provide safety planning, so anybody can call at any time to request safety planning, and so majority of safety planning that we do is in relation to abusive relationships with another person. Do a lot of safety planning in elder abuse cases or relationship violence cases, but we've also found that we do a lot of safety planning with folks where there's been some stalking and harassment and something going along those lines, and that's something that all services across the province provide. We have a senior safety program. This is our program alone. We had a series of grants to start this with, so we went through a series of different grants to create some kind of resources and some structure to a program that our goal is to try to teach older adults how to stay safe. So we're really focused a lot on fraud in particular and adults that are being taken advantage of in some way, shape, or form. That could be anything ranged from power of attorney, issues with power of attorney to, you know, somebody that's calling them pretending to be CRA. And so we have one staff member that's got an extended level of training in relation to elder abuse, and so she works within this program. We have our youth program, so we are probably one of the few, if not the only place that actually has an office in a high school. And so we created quite a number of years ago a program to try to intervene and provide services to teenagers in a more effective way. So we're finding is that the teenagers were getting involved in a lot of unhealthy relationships and things that were not really safe, but it was very hard to get connected to them. And so TIS was able to offer us an office place. We've been there for probably almost 10 years. And it's been a fantastic program. We've actually won a number of awards for this, and we were brought down to Pennsylvania to present this program to a large U.S. national symposium on sexual violence. So we've done a tremendous amount of work with this, and we see a ton of teenagers as a result. But you know, if you can intervene with a teenager when they're just getting the start of getting into unhealthy relationships instead of waiting until they're an adult, when there's been a lot of damage that's already done to us, that feels like it's a worthwhile effort. So we have our human trafficking prevention and intervention program. So the Ministry of the Attorney General gives us some funding for this, but it is also part of our core programming. And we have a couple issues here. So this is a very lengthy conversation, so I'm not going to go into tons of detail with it. But the between the 401 and the 416, we have human trafficking victims that are being driven up and down the highway every day. And they're stopping in your communities every day. And they're being sold to people who are buying the services every day. And we also have human trafficking victims that live within the communities of Leeds and Grenville and are not run up and down the highway and are being sold as well too. And so we have kind of two little pockets of it. It seems like everybody, you know, kind of you think that this is a city issue, and what we're finding is it's not. I mean, the cities are way more overwhelmed with this than we are, but last year I think we had about 23 intakes for human trafficking victims for Leeds and Grenville, and that started picking up because we've done a ton of public education starting in the spring. And when we go out, we do our last public education resulted in a human trafficking victim coming forward because she was in the room. And she came forward about a week later, and she's actually out now. So that turned out, you know, it was a wonderful ending to that, but it's also alarming to us how much is actually happening. So we have a victim quick response program that all the victim service sites provide, and so that's kind of based on an emergency kind of financial based assistance. So things like replacing a cell phone or providing a cell phone for, say, it's not an iPhone, right? You know, it's going to be your basic cell phone, but again, sometimes in a rural environment, sometimes that's your only option in terms of accessing 911 really quickly. There we can do things like change locks and put people occasionally in a hotel when need be, transportation, emergency counseling services as well. So because we have only one, you know, counseling for adult service that is spread across and one for kids, sometimes there's wait lists, and so we can, if we have a situation where somebody's felt that the traumatic event is not appropriate for them to wait, we can access funds for them to go see a trauma counselor through this program. And that's it. So I think I got pretty close to 10 minutes. So I'm certainly welcome to any questions that anybody has before I run off.
Councillor Ohlke.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I wonder if you could quantify for us which area of concern would be your growth area, which category of victimization is increasing the most and is the most worrisome to you?
That's a hard question to answer, because I think like they're all worrisome in a lot of ways. I think our highest volume, what we respond to the most, the highest volume, number one, is domestic abuse. And again, we see male and female victims of all ages, but hands down, we see that's in the hundreds of people that we see a year. Close usually on the heels to that is sexual abuse or sexual assault. And so one of the issues that I've been talking about when I've been doing kind of these tours around is that Leeds and Grenville is one of the only areas in the province that doesn't have a sexual assault crisis center that's funded by the Ministry of Attorney General's office. And so because of that, we lack a very vital resource that everybody else has. And so, and I think that that is something that's, obviously there's been a ton of conversation with our MPP's office, and that your mayor has been very supportive of in terms of pursuing that. And I think that that also plays into the impact it has on our organization is it creates a higher volume for us to respond to, and we don't necessarily have the financial resources that they do, and we don't have all of the, like they, you know, we don't have the same number of staff, we don't have the same number, the ability to just focus on that as an issue, and I think that that's something that's very worrisome.
Deputy Mayor Lackie.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. You started out by saying that, you're not asking for funding, but is there a relationship that we can establish where there's another way that we can help you, or is there something that we can do for you?
There's always something to do for us. I think right now, the Ministry of the Attorney General's office is supposed to be evaluating our programs to determine our funding levels. So we are funded to respond to 850 people once. We respond to anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 people multiple times. You can't, if there's been even a sudden death in your family, it's like we show up at your door and say, okay, bye, we're not going to talk to you again. Like, that's unrealistic. And then you start looking at homicides and human trafficking and domestic abuse. Those are long-term, take a lot of work. And so I think the biggest help, so while we don't do tons of fundraising, so we always welcome donations, definitely. But realistically, I think, if the ministry is going to have these programs, that they need to take a look at the funding formula and fund them appropriately. Hands down, we do much higher volume than many of their other programs that get a significant more funding than we do, and I don't begrudge them that, but they need to take a look at a realistic, funding level. And so if you guys can do any work in that department with our MPP, that would be, I think, a longer-term solution than us continuously looking around for somebody to help fund our MTS program, right?
Again, through you, Your Worship, it's a really great, I think more people besides this group need to be educated with this information, and I know I've heard good things through the casino and their funding group. You're a very worthwhile cause, and I hope that things go well for you.
I hope so too. I think the price to our communities, if they don't do this right, is going to be is something that you guys are going to then be struggling with, right? And so our hope is that Leeds and Grenville has been very, since we've been kind of more vocal about it in the news, that there's been a ton of support kind of pushing towards our MPP's office, who's been, and I have to make sure to say, he's been extremely supportive, and he was before he became a cabinet minister. So he's always been a huge support for us. So we're hopeful that that translates into something positive. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is the Ministry of the Attorney General's office, and they have to kind of figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to do this. So.
Councillor Ohlke.
Thank you, through your worship. How many people are you working with on your side of the organization to deal with these calls? Do you break these calls down to smaller regions other than Leeds Grenville? Like I'm asking about such as townships.
Sorry, I'm very hearing impaired. She's going to help me.
How many people, sorry?
How many people work on your side to deal with these multitude of calls?
4? 6, because we have 2
Six.
part-time. We have 4 full-time, so myself is one of the full-time. We have 3 frontline, and then 2 after-hours weekend staff that alternate. Patty's one of our after-hours weekends, so.
Okay, I guess what I was asking, I didn't know if you had volunteers behind the scenes helping as well.
We do have volunteers. We're staff-led, but we're volunteer-supported. So our policies are set in such a way that we're going out at 2 in the morning, out to somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. There's somebody, we're not going by ourselves. So we go in teams of 2. And so we are always looking for volunteers, and it is a process to become a volunteer. You can't just call up and go, hey, I want to help, and we're going to go, come on down. Like, there's a lot of training and screening and then more training involved with that. But the volunteers accompany staff to pretty much almost everything we do, because we can't, it's not necessarily always safe for us to be traveling around alone.
So everyone, please feel free to volunteer. You can go on the line, volunteer.
Councillor Ohlke.
Yes, a couple questions. You talked about your pagers. One thought, because of cell service and such, do you have any dead zones that give you difficulty in our area? And the other thing, you talked about a mobile tracker, and I was wondering what their cost is.
Oh, what's the cost of the tracker?
Cost of the trackers, and do we have any dead zones for our pagers?
The trackers actually, the pagers, yeah, those pagers are a nightmare. We've been working with a company to try to transition to a phone-based system, and they're in the process of testing it, I believe, in the testing phase, so we're hopeful we can switch to that. Our trackers, we have 10. We can't manage it, so it's a very intrusive program, so it's a lot of staff time, so more than 10 is not appropriate for us, because we don't have enough staff. And they cost us about $200 to purchase, and then another about $200 per tracker a year, that covers the year it's monitoring for them, so.
And one follow-up. With programs like this, it's very common that there's a stigma attached in different forms. How do you deal with that, broad-based?
He said sometimes there's a stigma attached. How do we deal with that?
I mean, I think, to be honest with you, there's a stigma attached to quite a number of things, right? And whether it be you're in an unhealthy relationship, or you're somebody in your family has a mental health issue or something like that. And I'm hopeful that a lot of our public training that we've been doing, we're doing a lot of training in regards to trauma and understanding how that impacts a person, is going to help people to understand how individuals end up in the situations they're in a way that allows them to be as supportive. And, we spend a lot of time helping people to work through whatever pieces they need to work through, so that they feel comfortable to access the resources that are going to help them get to where they want to go to next.
Thank you. Any further questions from councillors? Thank you very much for your
Thank you
presentation.
very much.
Moved by Councillor Ohlke, seconded by Councillor Ohlke. Sorry, I made the signature there. That committee of the whole recommends that council receive the information presented and thank the organization for their services. Any discussion on this motion? Further to the questions? I just like to personally thank you for all that you do for the victims. Unfortunately, we have victims in this township and in these counties, and that your services are required, which is a sad state of affairs in the grand scheme of things, but very grateful that you do exist, and I will continue to push at the county level and push our MVP to get that funding that you need for the ongoing running of these programs that are so integral to people's well-being. So thank you again. So I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. Next delegation up, John Taylor, Furnace Bowls Park Plan.
Good evening all. May I'll take a few storyboards and place them, hopefully not to block the audience. Just for, if I may, for one quick second, again, this is just, there's an aerial photograph of Lyndhurst. There's the storyboard that was created to look as part of the visioning project. With some photographs. I think you're quite familiar with them. These were posted at the library as well as in this building, but I will leave them for discussion and viewing. They are part of the internal information boards that live in this building through Kim's desk. Anyway, good evening. My name is John Taylor. I'm here to make a brief presentation and follow up on the Furnace Falls Park Visioning Project, and my thanks to Kimberly for all her help with the PowerPoint presentation and placing the report in full. If I may start off just with a quick bit of administration, there is a PowerPoint presentation. It's about 40 slides long. My quick calculations tell me I have about 15 seconds a slide. So I'll do what I can. I think if I stay on board with this as our guide, I'll work through things, and there may be a few tangents that come off that, but I'll try to stay on track through that. As a follow-up, this report speaks to the end result of our work together as a visioning project, and it does include some suggested tracks of action through a planning process for implementation in terms of phasing, as well as some rough order of magnitude costing for all of the things that we will discuss briefly. Please understand that these are visioning components. This is a study, a conceptual study of the park known as Furnace Falls, as well as the village of Lyndhurst, Ontario. So the very first slide, if we jump right in, again, in terms of following up on things, I wanted to make sure that the process went through and originated through these offices, through the CAO's office, the development with Kim's desk, to look into the opportunity, again, with the Lyndhurst Rejuvenation Committee, to talk about some rejuvenation and the concept visioning of the town of Lyndhurst, but specifically working with the park known as Furnace Falls Park. Through that process, there was a purchase several years ago of a property called 405 Lyndhurst. There was a derelict building that was demolished, and then that part of the property was then absorbed, hypothetically, in a bigger picture for concept as part of the potential park development as an extension, as a western portion on the other western side of the Heritage Bridge for consideration, concept development, and visioning as part of the greater Furnace Falls. Through that process, again, if I may quickly, I just wanted to make sure that in terms of the processing we went through council, it went through considerations through administrative offices, we went into information gathering, we went into processes where we did gathering through many of the stakeholders and community groups to achieve all kinds of input before we began the process of putting together original concept drawings and then a preferred concept drawing, which we moved forward to as an end result. Some of the things that were certainly spoken to were, again, very briefly, sustaining the natural environment, looking at our rivers, lakes, and natural landscapes, one of the contributing factors of quality of life in the township of Leeds and Thousand Islands. Again, understanding some of the feedback that the community development, people who live in the township of Leeds and Thousand Islands do so and remain here because of their close connection with the community, individual communities and as a greater whole. And again, the push to create a sustainable economy with new business, existing businesses, to ensure that there is investment and that those businesses that are here continue to thrive. Very brief overall view of Lyndhurst, looking from the south up Lyndhurst Creek. Again, looking into some of the strategic plan studies that were done through the Lyndhurst Rejuvenation Committee, some of their thematic themes and recommendations were, again, to promote the region because of its natural beauty, looking at business development and investment, understanding the local history and revitalizing landmarks, not just focusing on the historical bridge, but looking at the National Historical Site as a whole, and understanding how that whole cohesive unit can be emphasized with the park as part of the community of the town of Lyndhurst, the village of Lyndhurst. And also enhancing connections for sustainable growth, looking at some of the physicalities of the place, looking at some of the topography and changes that can be coordinated, looking at the digital representation as we move into the 21st century, what we can do to put Lyndhurst into that frame of reference and make sure that there is still sustainable connections with an internal social network. The Furnace Falls Park and Village, again, we looked at some of the options and considerations to try to create a community hub, looking at a very multidisciplinary approach to it. So we wanted to cover off as many bases as we could. Feedback we got from emphasis on blue water trails for canoe and kayaking, walking trails, emphasis on small craft boating and fishing, both summer and winter, a large emphasis on bicycle and bicycle routes, looking at how that could turn itself into a hub, and the interrelationship between blue water trails and upland trails with bicycles, so that if you create a zone they can come to, they could literally go from a kayak to a bicycle to enjoy Kendrick's Beach, to enjoy the surround, and then come back and continue on with their blue water trails, or vice versa. They could come in on a bicycle tour and enjoy some of the waterways that are extraordinary around that area, and enjoy the businesses in the community. We talked about some of the musical efforts of the past. We talked about musical efforts and interests of the future. We certainly looked at some of the historical aspects of the community and what they had to offer. We talked about economic revitalization. We talked about how to present that through interpretive signage and displays. And again, some hard, straight facts about the parking in that village, which are really need to be looked at carefully in order to engage many of these things. And again, not losing track of the local interests of the residents and community members. So some of the 4 key pillars, again, we'll get with the National Historic Site, looking how we could emphasize that and portray that. Emphasizing, again, natural water routes that are part of the community. Looking at amenities for visitors that are coming in. I've used a washroom facility, which we very successfully last fall brought up to full AODA standards. And also to create a gathering point for residents, local residents, as well as visitors, to come and have a gathering point. Something larger than a very small little footprint, but something that's substantial. There's something in the past, if I divert quickly, but there was, back in the early 20th century, the brass band from Lyndhurst was county renowned. And they brought in a couple of ringers, and they used to have an extraordinary couple of events in that. So it would be lovely to be able to create a band shell, to bring music back as part of an interesting program, but also as a gathering point for community to go and to talk about community issues, to gather as family and friends, and to try to integrate the community into something other than just homesteads, get people out. Quick transition slide just to make us into the next step. So what I've done next is I've tried to break down some of the components for development. Try to do it in a logical sequence as we move through the park. I've suggested that we start on Jonah Street, where there's a small park called Jonah Street Park. I've looked at some of I tried to encapsulate some of the parts of the furnace fall, and also to look at the benefits of including the village as a whole and some of the components within the village. I've suggested that the addition of a pickleball court on the existing concrete surface would be a very easy thing to do, and I think it would create a really diverse nature to that physical space. Not only could you use it for ball hockey in the summer and winter, but it does have 2 very good gooseneck basketball setups. But in order to emphasize a portable net and some very simple painting and some paddles and a few other things that could be leased or signed out from the library, they could create a whole new user base. I've also suggested, if I may very quickly, but there is a lighting standard. When we did that park, there is a conduit that's been placed, covered off with ESA. I have all the drawings and setups, but the conduits are in place to complement the nice new benches that are there, with a nice lighting standard in the middle of the park. So that's something we could look into, and all of the substructure work has been complete. One of the things that I think a lot of people are really looking forward to complement the new work that was done on the waterfront trail, which was accomplished again as a full AODA approach from the Furnace Falls turnaround to Jonah Street itself, the terminus of Jonah Street, is to create a complementary wetland lookout or outlook that would allow people to come down through the trail path out onto the water frontage and then have a nice lookout that looks out into the existing wetland looking up the creek. It's something that I think has been very sought after through the community as part of the feedback we've got from many parts, and it's a very simple piece of infrastructure that would also keep things very passive. And I think it would be a great enjoyment for many. Just another quick slide showing that one. I thought was rather apropos to the creek that is Lyndhurst Creek. As one of the compliments to this waterfront trail, I have certainly suggested that and reiterated that in the report, that there are some issues that need to be dealt with. The waterfront land on the water side of the new trail, of course, is township property. It needs to be approached carefully about how it's transitioned. But one of the ways we could continue doing that is to try to create some multiple native trees and shrubs to not only generate delineation, but also to create some privacy for the homeowners. And in doing so, one of the ways we could do that carefully and with respect is to create not Coney Island, but just some very passive benching systems that people, where they're enjoying the waterfront, could stand, sit, and enjoy a passive moment just to rest and enjoy the waterfront and the wetland. Thanks, Kim. If I may. Pardon me?
Oh, it is, it's changed on here.
Okay, I'm sorry. As we move further around from the waterfront into the Furnace Falls Park proper, where the boat launch is, I have certainly suggested, and through information gathering, that there is a need and a very strong want to create a secondary or tertiary docking system that would allow canoes and kayaks to properly portage launch and continue to make that move down through the village of Lyndhurst to meet with the portage point on the south end of Ford Street to continue on an extraordinary blue water trail that takes you into Lyndhurst Lake and down into Singleton, Red Horse, and then ultimately comes into Gananoque Lake and brings you right down into the St. Lawrence system. That's downstream, and you can certainly do the same thing upstream. The only impediment thus far happens to be around Marble Rock, which is being carefully addressed, and with all successes, I hope. There are certain different types of docking systems, but I think it would be a huge asset to get a very low-profile dock that would have helped accentuate that transition. This was presented again as a consideration for the south end of Ford Street. Certainly that is something that needs to be talked about and not expanded on at this meeting, but that particular piece has some interesting challenges. It is owned by the township, but leased by the Conservation Authority. It needs to come online in the next 5 or 6 years to have a full AOD access down to that waterfront. So it's something I've recommended in the phasing plan that we look at relatively soon, so that we can sort of unpack that origami and take a look at how we can best accomplish that over a long period, as we still have 5 or 6 years to accomplish that. I have suggested through not only the report, but in this particular slide, I've suggested that we look at creating at least one point, if not several points within the park, the greater park schematic, putting in a simple gaming table that would allow for chess and checkers. We've had great successes putting one here at Jerry Park, and the kids sign out chess and checkers packets from the library through Tara, and the kids go out and they play it and enjoy it. One of our biggest challenges with the wind at Jerry Park was getting heavier enough chessmen. I've also suggested that at some point in time, there's an integrated look at some of the park benching that's there. There's quite a different cross-section of benches. It would be nice to try to get some continuity, and as we go through, and as I've recommended in the phasing plan and report, over the next 6 phases of change in context, that there's a transition to a single bench type, so it has some nice continuity throughout the village. I came back to this, and there's several slides in this program that were part of the original program. I know there's been some interesting feedback about the fish cleaning station. I have a feeling that it wasn't presented as best we could, and I don't think I have time to, again, expand on the whole thing this evening. What I can say, though, if it's done properly, and I've done some costing to the effect that if there's an opportunity to create not just a wooden platform where people clean fish and are negligent, but if there's an opportunity to create a nice pier on the waterfront that actually overhangs into the water, and there's an opportunity to do it with some hose hookups, and it's done with some restorative landscaping around it, that waterfront that is now immediately next to the boat launch could be opened up for beautiful vistas, and I think it also would mean that all of the remains of fish cleaning would then go back in the water, the turtles would sort them out, and it's all part of the whole ecosystem. It wouldn't turn itself into something. So I think it needs to be reconsidered and looked at, and I mean that with respect, versus just kiboshing it for what it could be. Because I think it would be a huge asset to the community for boating. There's a large fishing community there. It's got some super sports fishing up in there, and I think it would be a huge asset to the community. Again, I left this slide in from the original presentation I did back in February of 2018. When we first talked about it, the impetus was to try to create interest, discussion about the need or want to create a pedestrian crossing other than the historic bridge at Lyndhurst. It's an extraordinary narrow one-lane bridge that's very highly used with heavy traffic. So the consideration for something that could be used for old and young, mums and dads with strollers, bicycles, an opportunity to have safe access back and forth across the Lyndhurst Creek. These were opportunities I brought and options I brought forward to look at one span, one floating. Since then, we've looked further and gone on to other ideas. This was brought to attention, and I did create this dynamic to take a look at some of the options. It was met with very positive feedback by many, but it was misconstrued in the sense that when this drawing was done, when the scene in front of you, the idea was to try to not block the bridge by any means. The idea was to complement the bridge. What this shows is some very large components that need to be modified. The arching engineering does not need to be required in that span. The physicality of the footing points is oversized, but certainly could be faced with stone instead, so that it complemented the bridge. The whole idea and the dynamic was to have the bridging so that it was above the cornice capping of the bridge, so that from this vantage, which is a highly sought after vantage, it would look like a railing set for the bridge, not in a visual impediment. So I think there needs to be some clarification and augmentation to that. Certainly it doesn't need to be wrought iron black, but I felt the complement with the very long and strong history of the Furnace Falls Iron Works to complement the stone bridge with the ironworks might be an interesting segue to that. So that needs to be revised. This picture again, very much like the middle one, shows, I tried to show a hypothetical crossing. Again, it misconstrues the overall intent. It should be a wee bit higher, and it should also maybe be a little bit wider. And again, this is just a from above view showing the dynamic. Please understand that that shows the bridge far too close from a heritage offset. There would likely need to be a couple of meters in between in order to accomplish that with success. This slide was simply to show that the single lane bridge does in fact very much compromise pedestrian and accessibility and safety. And it also shows that the repair that was done in the mid-80s has been complete. And certainly I think with the geomorphology that's in the middle of the creek, there could be a very, very simple component to a footing that would be help span. And I think it could be done aesthetically very interestingly. We talked about doing some washroom renovations last year. I've left a few of these slides in very successfully last year. We accomplished that, had great successes. This was when I went through the concept, the original concept. I was unpacking the opportunity and the possible need to look at something other than a septic system that may have gone past its prime. It turns out that the septic system is running beautifully, and it does have capacity to carry the existing use and projections for the next number of years. These slides again were to speak to the need and requirement for AODA standards, and some of the also trying to make sure that all of us were understanding what the composting systems in the 21st century are. They're extraordinary, and they can be very sizable as well to carry through all these things. One of the other things we talked about, and I brought up again in the report, that if there was ever an interest in the long-term phasing to create a separate independent washing facility on the west side of the park, this would be something that could be used independent of a composting toilet, composting system, but a small tertiary system that had a macerating system and a small septic bed that may be applicable to that park if it was deemed necessary. One of the things I did talk about also was that to create a four-season approach to washroom facilities, the existing library facility does have a washroom in the back. It is got full access, not only through the side door, but also to the front. If there was an opportunity to put some dollars and cents into that to make sure that renovation, therefore you would end up having an accessible, visitor-specific, 24/7, fully accessible visitors washroom within the community, which does not exist other than the one that's rather seasonal. As we move across the bridge, conversations that were specific and complementary to the archaeological studies that are going on there, part of the National Historic Site, was the need, want, or interest in creating an interpretive pavilion. So these are just two examples. One, again, was sort of a very simple wooden structure with a little detailing with some gable ends. And one of them, again, with a stone component to it that might be, again, complementary. As I understand, there's still quite an outstanding amount of stone that's left over from the renovation that was done in the 1980s that could be used to complement some of this, not only the bridge, but pedestrian bridge, but also to consider for some of the infrastructure that we were talking about, i.e. this building and the opportunity to once again complement stone with wrought iron to create a lovely band shell as a community gathering point, again on the 405 west side as part of the concept vision. These again are just simple Examples, the purpose of these is to show that there are many different scales, many different approaches, some of them with rural cupolas, some of them with wrought iron, some of them with staircases for a raised approach, and others that you could have a few pathways coming and going, or a nice circular approach to that. These slides were used, as is the next slide, for just the opportunity to understand there may be a need requirement, or certainly looking at the non-linear approach to parking in Lyndhurst, not only in capacity but also in the possibility of reshaping a few things to try to get a few more cars in that are done safely, and considered for satellite parking, for trailer parking, so they don't congest the one and only turnabout we've got at the boat launch. Once again, on the 405 side, as part of the development, certainly trails, as I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, was a very large push and consideration for the continued interest in the community area. And there's a very interesting opportunity to create a trails pathway on the west side of the park system, going down into the lower mill pond, and have a beautiful view of that. And then once again, if, as per discussion, there would be a very keen interest to try to create a loop that went from Jonah Street that goes through the village to create a nice wraparound trail development, albeit non-AODA, and maybe done with wood chips and rather more organic, but to have a really great walking trail that went all around the west bank of the Lyndhurst Creek down to the southern bridge from Jonah Street, creating a nice loop. This again was talked about in terms of having, and this was certainly from my desk as an idea, but again to have a tertiary bridge span that went from the lower mill pond. I've initially talked to some of the landowners and people to look at a feasibility about doing a secondary footbridge that crossed over and met up with the end of Ormond Street. Now I'm not sure everybody knows about the whole dynamic of Ormond Street, but it does come to a dead end and turn itself around into a sort of a dirt path road that's known as Second Road or Second Street. But there would be a really interesting opportunity to try to create that as a loop effect. Certainly staying on timelines, we talked about one of the importance, strong importance of wayfinding signs, information paneling in the community of different types, not only information that's specific to the town and village, but also to, if I may, the next slide please, to historical considerations, and also for some of the wetland approaches that would complement the lookout, as well as some of the waterfront trails, both on the east section, east and north section, as well as the new 405 section in some of the lower mill pond areas with identifiers. I have made it, as part of the visioning process, suggested that bring in secure bicycle lockup and storage, again as a complement to Blue Water Trails development, as well as bringing visitors in that can park their car, get on a nice bike, and then head out maybe to Kendrick's Park, enjoy an afternoon, come on back and carry on, or stay longer, enjoy a canoe. I've also suggested in this report that the township does not get involved with buying bicycles to rent them, and I leave that for consideration, but I was suggesting that maybe there's an opportunity to outsource that, to bring a company in that would be able to set it up, and they would then have all the liability, ownership, and everything with the bike itself through a seasonal basis. Once again, I've said that ensuring that the trails and lighting, not only are they important to accent and make some continuity in the community as a whole and the park as a whole, but also to allow the residents and community members to start congregating in their evenings and enjoy all of these trails and paths. Not just for the visitor. This is also for the community, and mostly for the community. And once again, I've said, per the report, and again later in the phasing, that there's an opportunity to look again at the lighting, benches, and wayfinding signs to make sure that as we move through these processes, they're considered as an end approach. These were recommendations that were done in 2018, and I can say with very happily that we were able to accomplish the full renovation, as I noted, with the washroom. We were able to pursue the waterfront renovation. Some of the others are still pending, including looking forward to creating dialogues with CRCA and strategic partnerships, funding grants, provincial and federal funding streams for considerations for some of the aspects that we talked about in this visioning project. And that is effectively a very, very quick review of the vision.
Thank you. I know we're not even halfway through the slides, so I know that we could be here easily for another half an hour. we do thank you for your work and the details. Do any of the councillors, actually, I'll put this motion on the floor. Sorry, Kim also has a report coming later in the meeting to address all the specifics to this, as well as the, I believe, the phasing part of it. Is that correct, Kim? Yes. So I'll put this motion on the floor now so there can be full discussion in regards to it. So moved by Councillor Jameson, second by Councillor Ohlke, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council adopt the Furnace Falls Plan as presented with Community and Business Services Report Number CDS-007-19. So any discussion on this motion? Deputy Mayor Lackie?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Taylor. We've been at this a long time,
Yes, sir.
you and I. We have a lot of concept drawings in offices all over Jesse Street and down the hall here. And I know this is a wish list. I think it's going to come down to needs and wants during budget time, and I get what we're trying to do here, but we've had Centennial Park, Kendricks Park, Jerry Park. We have concept drawings and stages for all of those parks, and I look at where we are now, and we're, no offense, but we're nowhere near your concept. So, I think you're a little large here, and what I feel it creates is the public's gonna look at this and say, oh my God, the township's gonna do all this stuff, it's so great, and it is, it's nice work. But, and again, we're gonna try and phase it in over the many years. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to needs and wants, and I would look to my councillors from that ward to find out what they're hearing that's missing. I know in Ward 1, we're not missing a lot of things. One of the things that was budgeted and one of the things that was on your list was a pavilion for $230,000. I sort of get a rough estimate of the things that were on this wish list, and I don't think we could achieve that in 100 years, even if we raise taxes by 100%. Again, what year did we start these concepts for Jerry? I think that was during Councillor Evans.
Well, Mayor, I think the mayor was Mayor Harold Greer.
Yeah.
And I believe
So,
it was
that was
2004.
That was Councillor Aerosmith, that was.
Yep.
So
2004, we did a full master plan.
Yeah, so I mean, if we look at what all concepts and all the money that have been spent, what have we done? Out of the whole thing. And I think what it comes down to, again, needs and wants. When it comes to budget time, we'll listen to our constituents and let them tell us. This is grandiose. It's very nice. It's a great presentation, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to pay for this.
Through you, Your Honor, if I may, do you have a question?
Sorry.
Did you have a question?
Sorry, I just wanted to go back through your concepts, all the ones that we have, and what we've actually accomplished out of it, because I know we sacrificed Jerry so that we could do Centennial to a stage, and we could do Kendricks to a stage. We were gonna come back and do some other things, but, I mean, we're nowhere near what was projected, correct?
I guess I have to disagree. In the sense that through the process of management and planning and phasing, there's been quite a few changes in Jerry Park with the splash pad. There's been upgrades to the racquetball sports. There's now a new pavilion. There's an aggregate parking lot. There's been a new baseball diamond. There's been some beautiful terraforming that's been done. There's been designs for the possibility of putting in some town housing. At Kendricks Park, there's been some extraordinary changes there with new pavilions and canopy or canteens. The waterfront was refurbished. The old schoolhouse was carefully and considerately taken down. That whole park was planted out with trees. A new aggregate parking lot was put in. Considerations for next steps. Centennial Park has got a tennis court, a basketball court, trails, beautiful trees, new aggregate parking lot, an MOU with the CRCA for consideration of use of that property. Interesting connections to Bay Street, taking you down to the waterfront that weren't there before. So, and Bay of St. Lawrence has been slow to start, but there's some really great conceptual work going on there. So I think in fairness, there's been some wonderful changes.
And through your worship, I don't think you heard me. I said we did sacrifice some things here so that we could accomplish the first phases of the other parks. I do understand that. But if we may, and it could be circulated, everybody should see the actual concept drawings.
Talking about the original.
The original concept drawings for all the parks.
So I guess I'm at a loss, because I think you guys are saying one and the same thing, actually. You're actually saying that there's been quite a bit that has been accomplished from 2004.
There's a lot of phases. I mean, I could go back and say, you know what, we're supposed to have a trail from the school to actually through the township to the fairgrounds. We're supposed to have hedges and pathways, and you know, I've got that burned into my mind from the original concept drawing, and I'm just saying that we need to be cautious in what we present. I know we have to have a dream, we have to have a vision, but we also have to have a vision of who's paying this bill and what's going to get accomplished. I just hate to see someone go away from this and say, oh, you're putting in a pedestrian bridge tomorrow, or you're putting in whatever, a fish cleaning station, or you know, something like that, when in actual fact, it could be 10, 15, or never. And I know the vision is there, and it may come, but I just think we need to tone it down.
And before I take questions from Councillor Ohlke and Councillor Meady, I'm going to actually ask Ms. Goodman to give her report, because it might provide some clarity as to where next steps may be going, and then we'll take the questions after that, if that's kosher with the councillors. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you, Your Worship. And as has been stated here already, I would first like to thank Mr. Taylor for coming out this evening and giving us an overview of the plan that he's been working on, and to acknowledge that, yes, the plan is quite aspirational in its goals, as have the earlier park plans or facilities master plan or any plan that's been developed or commissioned on by approval of this council. So this goes back not this term, but previous term, previous term, previous term. As council, as senior staff, and I believe increasingly so, even members of our public are cognizant of the fact that municipalities are experiencing some challenges with respect to funding. Particularly in our municipality, we have reduced funds coming to us from the casino. We're being impacted by reduced transfer payments coming from the province, from the federal government. And this, of course, impacts our ability day by day, year by year, to implement plans on the ground, which is why we often bring forward conceptual plans, very much like this one. It is a guiding document. It is not a prescriptive, you will in this year, and you must in this year, and you will in this year. Because really at this point, we rely then on staff to go out and do some additional consultation with members of the public to pick those year by year or reoccurring 3-year programs or projects that council would look at as part of capital budgeting, that we might address as part of strategic planning, that as staff we would look at as part of our annual work plans, so that we're not asking to spend exorbitant amounts of money on a year-by-year basis, but instead that the projects that staff bring forward for council approval are addressing potentially emerging issues. So if we have failing play structures, for example, that dollars are allocated first to maintaining what we have and making sure that it's safe, accessible, and so on, and then finding measurable things that we can bite off. Of course, this would take input from our new treasurer, but just in terms of what funding do we have available, how do we wish to allocate that? How was money allocated last year or even over the last 3 years, so that we don't want to see, again, as this council is very aware, we're responsible for 5 built-up areas or 5 hamlets, and we have a myriad of rural areas in between. And so really it's for council to kind of pick and choose how that money is distributed or allocated across the entire township for the benefit of all of our residents and tourists alike. So again, with that in mind, what you see in front of you is, of course, a conceptual plan, some of which we've taken on already, and that includes the work that we did on the waterfront trail last year. It includes the renovations to the washroom. Again, already on the docket, and as you heard mentioned here today, will be some wayfinding signs, for example. This council already approved upgrading some of our waste receptacles, for example, to start going to the dual garbage recycling sort of thing. So there are some gradual ways that we can begin to look at implementation, and as both of these gentlemen have already alluded to, sometimes you can have a couple more progressive years and get a little bit more accomplished. That sometimes happens on the backs of grants or community donations and fundraising, and I know already that the LRC in particular has done a great job with this in terms of championing local on-the-ground projects. And again, it is a very dedicated and reasonable group of people that we're able to partner with. So again, we'd be biting off appropriate and timely projects. So I'm hoping that council will, of course, bear that in mind as they're considering this, that it is a concept, it is a visioning document, but that really it will remain with staff and council to kind of see how it rolls out. John is simply providing some guidance in terms of where the priority projects are, but it's not phase 1 is year 1, phase 2 is year 2. Phase 1 might take us a couple of years. And I don't think that, again, we do have residents and members of public who are very cognizant that this is a big plan with a lot of big ideas, but it certainly gives us all something to work toward.
Thank you, Ms. Goodman. Councillor Ohlke and then Councillor Mayor.
Through you, your worship, I'd like to thank people for all the work that was done in the past and how you brought us up to the present. That I used to be a staff planner in a different type of organization, and I know what this takes to achieve and to stand there with the courage to present it to a fairly skeptical group.
Thank you. On the contrary, the group is just asking questions to ensure they have all the information they need to make decisions.
I have reason for what I say. What I suggest as a way ahead to look at this kind of project is to look at what provides the greatest utility to the quality of life of the community as soon as possible. There's a huge liability on that bridge with pedestrian traffic, especially given lifestyle in our historic villages. You have a lot of elderly people and surprisingly a lot of children trying to access across that bridge, particularly in the wintertime, with reduced visibility and reduced traction and all the rest of it. If there was a vote on what to do first, I would say the pedestrian crossing. We're not going to vote on that tonight. What I suggest is that we amend the motion.
You're proposing an amendment.
Amendment to the motion.
Okay, so motion is made by Councillor Jameson and Councillor Ohlke. Looking for a friendly amendment. You want to propose your amendment and then the councillors can say whether it's friendly or not.
I'll try to wordsmith this as I go. Please hold your shoes, do not toss them across the floor. Okay. That the committee of the whole recommends the council adopt the Furnace Falls Park plan as presented with a view to identifying those aspects of the plan which provide the most utility to the community in the most timely manner.
While the clerk is finalizing that, just to let everybody know, the video is up and running, and it's running very well, apparently. And that's, I apologize if you see me on my phone. I usually don't have my phone attached to my hand during these meetings, but I'm checking in with people who are watching to make sure that it's still running. And apparently the quality and the sound is exceptional. So thank you for everybody's patience for waiting for the new system to be up and running. Who would like to second the amendment? Councillor, or Deputy Mayor Lackie? CDS-007-19. The amendment was moved by Councillor Ohlke, seconded by Councillor Deputy Mayor Lackie, that the motion be amended to reflect the following. That the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council adopt the Furnace Falls Park Plan as presented with a view to identify the aspects of the plan which provide the most utility to the community in the most timely manner. Any further discussion on this motion that's presented? Councillor Grenville? Yeah, go ahead with your questions.
Yeah, what I wanted to say with this, and thank you, Your Worship, is I think we need to look at the public safety aspect of what's being proposed. The pedestrian bridge, in my mind, is number one, as well as the parking and sidewalks to continue the safety of people, particularly during the Turkey Fair time. Some of the other items that are there are niceties and will come in time. But again, if you're going to go with a theme, I think it needs to be iron, because if that's the ironworks of the area, I think any lamp standard, benches, garbage receptacles, the pedestrian bridge, any handrails should be of all the same flair, so that we reflect truly what our heritage is in ironworks there. But certainly the pedestrian bridge is number one on my mind to help in public safety.
Any further questions or comments to be made on this report? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented, as amended, I should say, please signify. Oh. 2, 3. No, it's the way it's read. It says the amendment. It's the amended motion. It's all one. So, all those in favor of the amended motion, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for bringing all the details forward, and I look forward to, myself and the council should look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Arnold.
Now I have some housekeeping items, and please, I do apologize. We do have a new face at the table here today. We have our new treasurer, Kate Tyndall. So we'd like to welcome her officially to the township. This is her first day, so it's trial by fire here at council tonight, and we look forward to working with you in the future and your skills that you'll bring to the table. And I already made the video announcement. So the video is up and running and hopefully will be stable for going forward. And for those who were under the impression that we would not be videotaping in the future, that was an incorrect falsehood that was spread viciously throughout the township. But looking forward to having these streamed in better quality for the residents to watch. Next on the agenda. So we have already dealt with the victim services at Leeds and Grenville. That motion was already put on. The next motion is Councillor Mayne, seconded by Councillor Cody, that Committee of the Whole recommends the Council award tender FIR-2019-001 to Gananoque Chev in the amount of $42,664 plus net agency of $5,546.32 for a total of $48,210.32 to be funded from the Fire Capital Reserve, whose submission represents the lowest bid received, and that Committee of the Whole recommends Council authorize the purchase and installation of a cap, lights, and siren package and decals at the estimated cost of $12,000 to be funded from the Fire Capital Reserve. Any discussion on this motion before us? Councillor Mayne.
Just one quick comment, Your Worship. Glad to see that it is actually somebody local who's getting this award, so thank you.
Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Next on the agenda, moved by Councillor Burrell, seconded by Councillor Ohlke, that Committee of the Whole recommends that Council authorize the Mayor and Clerk to enter into an automatic aid agreement for fire protection services with the Town of Gananoque as presented to Council. And further that, the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council direct staff to review the automatic aid agreement in 6 months and report back to Council. Discussion on this motion, please. Deputy Mayor Lackie.
passed, and I want to make sure that, you know, it's about safety, and the first person on the scene has got some equipment to do the job, so I just wondered if you could fill me in entirely on the background on this.
Thank you. Through your worship, we did review the agreement, just to update it. When we did that, it seemed that the Gananoque Fire Department were covering the whole area that we used to pay them to cover, as well as to provide them with a tank truck. I think probably Deputy Mayor can remember those days when we did that. At that time, that whole area was taken off the map. We developed the Station 3 facility, and last year spent $600,000 in the truck there. We do have a crew of about 26 personnel at that station. It seems there was some discrepancies with talks with Gananoque, about run times and so on. We do have comparable response times to that same area, and that whole area would require them to go past our Station 3 to go to some of these calls. Therefore, we developed a new map where the west end stays the same through to the county line. Some of the high-end subdivisions in that area, Gananoque will be also tiered with us, an automatic aid, right through to Fox Run, all the areas along the parkway, right to that area. And Station 3 would be responsible for the north end. And that's the way we set it up. Cut the area down. You can see the green area on the map illustrates the area that they considered where they're responding to, right down to Kite Road, which is totally down because Station 1 can cover that quicker. We also had my personal feeling was Gan was going to be left open there as well. If they sent somebody right down to Kite Road, what if they had an incident in town? So there were some concerns from both sides of the table. We worked them out on April the 23rd. I think we had a meeting with CAOs, the fire chiefs, and the firemen, and we brought all the stuff to the table. We discussed it, and it seemed to be a mutual agreement at that time.
Deputy Mayor, follow up.
That was just, my next question was where, even though we would pass this, where was the town going to be? But you say it's, their meetings are on Tuesday, so they'll probably pass this tomorrow night?
Through you, Your Worship, I believe that's the understanding, is they would carry it through to the next meeting possibly.
Okay.
I think they're the 26th, was it, the meeting in Gananoque?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just spoke with the CAO today from Gananoque, and they would, if this is approved by our council next week, their next opportunity to approve would be, I believe, August 15th or 16th, their meeting in August.
For the clarification. Anything further? Councillor Brown.
Through you, Your Worship, the just clarification on and direct staff to review in 6 months. Is there provision in this agreement to make changes, or is it sort of locked down? When you say what are we reviewing in 6 months, and is it actionable?
Through you, Your Worship, we will be reviewing it, and I believe that we will institute a clause that says we could change it at that time due to any discrepancies with our response times.
Thank you.
I'll recognize the CAO to add to that as well, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's not a specific mention of the 6-month review, but there's provision for review, and I spoke with the CAO today from Gananoque, and she thinks that a 6-month time frame would be good to review response times and to get together and to make any changes to recommendations.
I'll be honest, I asked for this provision specifically. The main reason being, as I spoke to the chief and the CAO when this was brought up, I just want to make sure that it's an actionable item, that we can go back and look at response times, that the changes are in a positive fashion, and that it's working for our residents and for the fire stations, and that they're able to respond. But not only that, the people that need the response are getting what they need. So with any change, you want to make sure that it's the right change. But without that reminder to have that review, that's why I asked to have it added to the motion. Councillor, maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple things that I noted was that on the west side, we still have mutual aid agreement with Kingston Fire Department, correct?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct, Councilor.
And the other thing that I do know is that Gananoque only has 2 trucks that would be capable of actually fighting the fire, where we have many more that are capable of the task. So I hope that, and I know for a fact that we can make those areas as quickly as they can, given their personnel load up at the station kind of scenario. So I see it as a very good thing that the map has been realigned here to a more realistic goal, I think, from our point of view, because we have the personnel and the trucks and the equipment that can make this happen a lot better. So I'm very happy to see this realignment, and I'm sure that it'll work out much better than it has in the past.
Any further comments or questions in regards to this motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of said motion, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Moved by Councillor Ohlke, seconded by Councillor Lackie, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council receive the resolutions from the Economic Development Committee and provide direction to staff to review the terms of reference of the EDC in consultation with the EDC and bring forward recommended revisions for council approval. Discussion on this motion.
We skip by it unfinished. It's really good.
Oh, sorry, you're right. I apologize. Scratch that. I got it. Clerk got me ahead there. That's, I'm gonna blame her. Unfinished business. Anybody who wants to add anything to unfinished business? Any other business that needs to be added to this? Councillor, or Deputy Mayor Lackie?
I didn't want to bring it forward as a notice of motion, but I know other municipalities up and down our Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence have been petitioning the joint services, and the mayor has talked about it in great detail to us, and we really haven't put anything down on paper. You know, whatever comes our way, I think we should support, but I would like to see us put something on paper as well. We have a great vested interest in there, and I'm going to tell you from personal experience, I'd love to show you the pictures, but I've got a boat that's decimated. It's done. It's bad news out there, and I think we need to petition our upper levels of government to take a good long hard look at this. So if there's any opportunity that could be brought forward to the clerk's office, or if I need to bring notice of motion, I will.
I think you just did.
Yeah, if you want anything action, it'll have to be a notice of motion because there's nothing on the agenda tonight. Speaking to it?
I will give you.
Okay. Next week.
So we'll have a notice of motion in regards to the water levels on the St. Lawrence River. Just as an aside, I have been in contact with the other mayors along the river. We are trying to lock down a meeting with the St. Lawrence River Board, who takes direction from the IJC, it's sort of the step down from IJC. And there is some movement on that. I don't have any specific dates yet, but we're getting closer. So as soon as I have those details, I'll share them with the rest of the council and the residents here as soon as I can. Matters arising from the standing committees. Now we're here on motion. I apologize. I'll read the motion again. Moved by Councillor Ohlke, seconded by Councillor Lackie, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council receive the resolutions from the Economic Development Committee and provide direction to staff to review the terms of reference of the EDC in consultation with the EDC and bring forward recommended revisions for Council approval. Discussion on this motion, please. Councillor or Deputy Mayor Lackie.
Through you, Your Worship, just for clarification, I know that I've had some feedback from some community members and some residents that feel that we're abandoning economic we have such great video now and we have good feedback. I think it needs to be said that, in fact, we're not. We're trying to do better and I don't think they understand. We didn't go behind the economic development committee's back. We were just put up against the wall as far as timing. No matter what, we still have a year of service with the St. Lawrence corridor that we paid for and potentially something great, good may come from that. And we have till December to option back in. So I think it was one of those decisions that council had to make all on their own as elected officials. And, I think moving forward, we certainly will respect the feedback from the Economic Development Committee.
Councillor, maybe I'll make one comment, just because I was at that meeting and maybe Councillor Ohlke can speak to it as well. I think what the Economic Development Committee is really looking for is maybe even pared down terms of reference as to what the expectations, what we are looking for from them. So I believe that the intent, and Councillor Ohlke can correct me or what I'm about to say, they're looking for some specific things that they would like, that we would like them to do or bring back to us, information, initiatives, whatever it is, so that we can assist business owners here in this township. The terms of reference are fairly clearly laid out, I felt, but at the same time, there's still some confusion with the community, so maybe we need to simplify that even more so. That's what I'm gonna add to this conversation for the time being. Councillor Beatty and then maybe Councillor Floyd.
The only thing I'd like to add to that, thank you, Your Worship, is I think they need to come to us and present us with what they can give us, because I'm not sure what they're doing for us, and that was pretty clear at our last meeting. As much as we can tell them maybe what we want, but what do they have in their toolbox that they can help us with?
I think we have some confusion here. So this is the Economic Development Committee of ours, not the corridor. Different. You're speaking about the corridor, or are you speaking about the corridor? So the corridor is slated to come, they're trying to get on our agenda. I believe September is when they're hoping to come and present to council. So we will get full details from them. I have another meeting with the corridor I have a mayor's meeting August 7th, and then I believe there's another corridor meeting the end of September the 25th or something. So we will be getting some more feedback from the corridor, which will help us make better decisions when it comes to budget time, which will be coming up very quickly after that point.
I'm sorry about that,
No,
but
that's
that was my thing, is having the corridor actually speak what they can do, because that was our dollar-driven decision. And so.
Thank you. Councillor Cody, and then Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I agree with the words you have said, Your Worship. The Economic Development Committee that we appointed are looking for direction from us with funding included. They want a specific direction of what we expect from them. And they would like to have that better clarified and the appropriate funds backing that up so they know what they can do and how to move forward. There was some erroneous innuendo flying around our township for a number of weeks unchecked, mostly because we had no online coverage. And it wasn't anybody's fault. It wasn't deliberate, as was alluded to earlier. Such as rumor mills, and some people like to perpetuate them. The facts are that we moved forward and we aligned some of the staff and realigned some of the staff. And thankfully, at that Economic Development Committee meeting, our worship was there along with our Director of Planning. And between Marnie and her worship, I think they did an excellent job of making those in attendance understand why it was we did what we did. But nonetheless, I support what they brought forward. I think we do need to clarify for them what it is we expect, or what is they expect, I should say.
So in the motion, it does say provide a direction to staff to review the terms of reference. So that's what the direction of this motion is, so that we can maybe further clarify what those terms of reference are. Okay. Councillor Jameson?
Well, I think you just really answered the question I was going to ask, Your Worship. Just to be
clear, we are going into an operational review, my understanding, in September. Presumably, these committee mandates could be looked at that time as the staff reviews them. In the meantime, I think it's important to point out to any committee that needs to be reminded that they are advisory. And at the end of the day, we have to make decisions and govern. And that's it. But as far as an operational review goes, I would like to see that, the mandate of the committee, looked at yet again in the context of where we might be going. Because I think it's we do not have a clear picture of what economic development is in our own minds yet as a township. So I hope that that operational review takes these things into account.
Thank you for that reminder. As well, when we were in that meeting, the Director of Planning also spoke to the strategic planning process that we'll be going through in early 2020, which will speak back to what we want to see as a vision for this township, and specific to communities, specific to businesses, specific to parks, specific to roads and active transportation. And that's why a lot of these studies and reports are being done in anticipation of this upcoming review of the strategic plan. So I think it's a chicken and egg thing right now, because we're on the cusp of doing that new strategic plan, which really we need the economic, in my view, the Economic Development Committee could be a very integral part of that process. It should be, so that we can provide as much support and assistance to our local businesses, whether it be through cleaning up our communities, grass mowing, painting, dump days, just getting the communities into tip-top shape so that when the people drive by, they actually want to stay. Further to the broadband committee, or the working group that's trying to further that project. Hopefully, we'll see some movement with the funds that are allocated. So the motion that's on the floor right now in regards to staff to review the terms of reference and forward recommendations for the council to review, I think that everybody's made comments in regards to that, and that it sounds like they're supporting it. Councillor Jameson?
Just to the extent that staff bringing something forward for review, is that going to be in the context of the operational review, so that we're looking at everything universally and not just the slivers that we tend to have inherited slivers of activity that are not integrated and cohesive.
Thank you, Your Worship. It'll be included in that review that we're going to be proactive and engage with the Economic Development Committee early, as soon as this is passed, so that we can get a dialogue going. And if I might add, Your Worship, we have strengthened our economic development activity by assigning tasks to the Director of Planning and Development, and also by expanding the role of the Manager of Community Services to Manager of Community and Business Services. So it's not, I want to get the message across that we're not just sitting and waiting for a strategic review. We're being proactive, and we'll continue to provide economic development services.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? Carried. Okay. Next motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Ohlke, seconded by Councillor Lackie, that the committee of the whole recommends that staff be directed to establish a comprehensive compendium of TLTI agreements and contracts that is transparent and accessible to facilitate council's and public's awareness of their relevance and currency. Discussion on this motion. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ohlke, I'm looking at you from the.
Your Worship, if I might, and if you remember, our last meeting was a little bit of confusion about contracts, where they stood, what they amounted to, what their provenance was. What I propose, simply from this, essentially would take the form of a matrix, which would be produced from a spreadsheet. There would be a searchable contract number, a description of what the contract was, including its cost? Its title, and whether it was proposed, active, or completed, just an X for each of those. And then perhaps some notes that should be added. I have consulted some staff about this, and apparently such a thing is relatively easy to produce and maintain. And I would suggest that it only begin from when this council took office and then going forward. Anything that was still active from before our time would of course be listed. But you have to start somewhere, and without going down too many old rabbit holes, it would bring us forward and keep us in the picture.
I think that's a very good recommendation. The good news is I believe that our service request system that should be in place in the next couple of months, that staff have been working hard on, should have this capability as well. If not, I'm sure the staff could easily create such a spreadsheet. I took quite a bit of heat at the Economic Development Committee in regards to this very thing. How did we not know that clause existed in that contract? And what maybe some people fail to realize is the number of contracts and the number of agreements that we have with a number of different, automatic aid and all these things that, should be reviewed, whether it be, our legal services, tenders, things that should be going out for RFP and RFQ and all that sort of stuff. And it gets lost in the shuffle, so to speak. So I can understand the frustration of the residents around that, but I would like to support the staff in that they have a lot of different agreements to monitor and take care of, and depending on the changes in staff, sometimes they get lost in that particular shuffle. So with this new service request system, or with the addition of what you're proposing, either way, we would hopefully going forward stay out of that, stay out of those weeds, if you will. So I think it's a great suggestion. If anybody has any other suggestions to that? Okie dokie. Nice suggestion, Councillor Ohlke. I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Okay, next on the motion is Mayor's update. I'll be honest, my brain is pretty much fried from today. The CAO and myself and the chief spent today in Rockford Courthouse in Courtman 1 from 10 o'clock this morning basically until 4 p.m. today. The former fire chief, Jerry Bennett, answered to the charges that were laid in December. He has pled guilty to, I believe, 24 of the 25 counts, something to that effect. I'd have to get the technical notes out, but like I said, I'm running on fumes at this point. But the important piece to the day to me was that both the town of Gananoque and the township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands had an opportunity to provide a victim impact statement. Up until now, until these charges were read and answered to, we haven't been able to publicly say anything in regards to this ongoing investigation. The Crown Attorney, acting on behalf of the town and the township, made her case today and very clear that there was systematic and pervasive fraud that happened here in this township in the town of Gananoque. The upsetting part to me as the mayor, and I'm sure to the other council members and previous council members, was that we were totally unaware until we were made aware. And then once we were made aware, the stones just kept rolling down the hill and uncovering more and more things. So at the court proceedings today, I gave the victim impact statement, and with your leisure, if you would indulge me, I'd like to give that impact statement again. It is a public document, and I think it's important that the residents of the township hear this from me, that were unable to attend court today. My name is Corinna Smith-Gaffney, and I'm currently the mayor of the township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands. I stand before you today to deliver a victim impact statement pertaining to the charges laid against Jerry Bennett, who was employed by the town of Gananoque and contracted to our township as fire chief. I am here to inform all present, including Jerry Bennett, that his dishonest and untrustworthy actions are still felt today within the township and will be for years to come. I am a lifelong resident of this township, and as a child at the young age of 6, I witnessed my father call the local fire department to come and help us as our barn was on fire. Again, in my 18th year, I watched fire trucks roll into our farmyard so they could extinguish the fire that started in the homestead where my uncle lived. Numerous other residents have similar stories where they were dependent on the volunteers that make up this fire department. Our community trusts the fire department. We trust them to be there. You, Jerry Bennett, have caused distrust. To put it simply, you abused the public purse. You stole from our residents and our neighbors. Your actions have poisoned the volunteer fire service and pitted your former firefighters against one another because some could never imagine that their chief would commit such despicable acts. We depend on a volunteer fire service to be available when disaster strikes. To have this disenchantment and disillusionment is heartbreaking, all of which was entirely preventable. This is a direct result of a person who abused his position of trust and stole from our taxpayers. He has dishonored the uniform that so many of our volunteers proudly wear. Mr. Bennett, directly to you, I hope you are ashamed of yourself. Your dishonesty and disregard for our taxpayers of the township is vile. The restitution of $15,879 is inconsequential compared to the actual amount that was stolen from the taxpayer. In no way can you have a conscience. If you did, you couldn't have patted the back of a firefighter telling them great job and then turn around and steal equipment, create invoices to line your own pockets. You have made a mockery of the trust we put in our public service. Our taxpayers trust us as council members to pay attention to the budgets presented. You sat at our council meetings and you lied to us deliberately. It was our employee who started asking questions about invoices, which ultimately led to your downfall. Our taxpayers are everyone from pensioners to wealthy business owners to struggling families. Every cent you stole is unrecoverable and therefore has put a further burden on our residents. This is your legacy. I made this victim impact statement on behalf of all the residents who pay us taxes and trust us to monitor those dollars on a day-to-day basis. Please accept our apologies for all those who feel that that it seemed like we were, I believe the words witch hunt was used in a number of occasions, but please understand that there was verified proof of this happening in our township. Mr. Bennett was not sentenced today. He will be sentenced in August, and we will make an appearance at that time. So we appreciate those who have supported us, and those we will hopefully move past this. Our volunteer fire service can mend and move forward, and we appreciate everything that they do on a day-to-day basis and be there for them to answer the call. So thank you very much. And there's lots of stuff going on in July that hasn't happened yet. I just want to remind everybody here at the council table that we will be dedicating Harold Emmons Way and unveiling on July the 20th at 10:30, I believe. It's a very busy day, so we actually did this on purpose. And the reason being is that we want as many people there as possible. That morning is the Thousand Islands Association breakfast at the Thousand Islands Playhouse, which I believe is 8:30. Then we have the dedication at 10:30 for Harold Emmons Way, and then we have the parade for the Lansdowne Fair at noon. So it's a jam-packed morning, but part of the reason we did that is because people will be coming into the village for that specific reason. So we want as many people as possible to pay homage to Mr. Emmons and his contribution here at the council table. And then I believe the Charleston Lake Association also has their meeting on the 20th, the morning of the 27th. I'm trying to remember where it is, but it's escaping me at this point. So lots going on here in July. Lansdowne Fair is that particular weekend, the 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st. I will be opening the fair on the evening of the 18th, so come on to it all. And I think that's the only other thing I'd like to add to my mayor's update. We've had had two very good meetings since our last council meeting. One is in the village of Lyndhurst, along with some members of the LRC, Councillor Ohlke, Councillor Jameson, and myself did a bit of a walkabout to see the improvements that have happened here, and to see the list of things that, it's great to see the plan formalized. A lot of these things were on the list when we talked to Mr. Sedaris from Wings Live 8, and that I believe that Lyndhurst has seen some remarkable rejuvenization that has been a direct result of the involvement of the community, and so we thank you for that. Also, Councillor Garrell and I and some staff members were down in Rockport, meeting with the Rockport boat line, talking about traffic and talking about boat ramp and a number of different things. And it was a very good meeting. I think that there was going to be good things coming out of that meeting, and going forward with the plans that the director of planning has in the study that she is going to be presenting to us. So all in all, it's been a very busy month and moving forward. So thank you very much. Councillor Maybe.
Just a couple other dates to throw in there. TRA is having their annual general meeting this Saturday at Rockport Community Hall. It's at 9 o'clock. As well as the Boat Museum in Gananoque is having an event this Saturday, and have asked, I think all the councils got an invite to that. Again, they'll booked already on that one. And then just to lead off the 20th, it's Heritage Days in Gananoque, as well as that weekend is a Pride Weekend in Gananoque. So there's some events there with different things happening in Joelstone, as well as a parade on the Sunday. So fun bill for all.
Councillor Ohlke.
Thank you, Your Worship. To this one, I'd like to credit to our Director of Operations, Mr. Jodoin, for overseeing our standpipe water reconstruction for the last several weeks, if not months. And I understand from what I've seen and what I've heard that it's running ahead of schedule and it is not an encumbrance to the opening of the Lansdowne Fair.
And our splash pad will be up and running as soon as the standpipe refills, which is what it's doing right now. So we're waiting patiently for that. So those of you who are listening out in the township land to this meeting, we will have that splash pad up and running as soon as we possibly can. But we can't turn it on to the detriment of drinking water. So that's what we're waiting on at this point. Councillor Jameson.
Just to say, Your Worship, thank you for coming and speaking at the International Canada Day celebration in Stevens Bay. We appreciated you coming out. And I also like to thank township staff for working very hard that day to be part of it, as well as providing services we needed to make. Thanks.
Yes, I was remiss to not mention Canada Day. It was a great time to be there. I got to go in the first parade of my tenure as mayor of this township, which was a lot of fun. It was great to see a lot of familiar faces out there, and to bid adieu to the TP and the future that awaits us there. Also to have our MP and our MPP in attendance, and Councillor Fody, Councillor Ohlke, Councillor Jameson. So it was a good day. So thank you for the invite. Councillor Maybe.
Just to throw back to Canada Day, since we had, as a town crier, I MC one Gananoque with the MP, MPP, and also Chittenware played with fanfare of fireworks, which was very well done this year.
Any further announcements that I've forgotten? I apologize. Seeing none, last motion moved by Councillor Lackie, or Deputy Mayor Lackie, seconded by Councillor Ohlke, that the committee of the whole adjourned. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
What do you think the odds